For a lot of autistics and ADHDers, loneliness didn't just happen. It didn't just show up one day as a preference or a lifestyle choice. It's something we slowly grew into through experience, repetition, a kind of learning that wasn't conscious. Many of us were isolated long before we had words for it. Sometimes it was feeling completely unseen, even in a room full of people. We might have spoken honestly and have been told we were rude. We might have stimmed or moved in a way that brought us calm, only to be told it was distracting or strange. And maybe we just couldn't figure out the unwritten rules, no matter how closely we watched. And when we got it wrong, we were corrected, mocked, or silenced. These moments might have looked small from the outside, but when they happen over and over again, they start to change how you approach people. You learn to anticipate rejection before it arrives. You try to preempt discomfort by keeping your distance. Sometimes you don't even realize it's happening. You start skipping group events. You answer texts a little slower. You stop reaching out to people you used to care about because trying just feels too effortful now. And when that becomes your normal, you start to think, maybe I'm just someone who prefers being alone. And that might be true in part. Many of us genuinely enjoy solitude. But it's worth pausing and asking, is this the kind of alone that fills me up? Or is it the kind that shrinks my world? For many neurodivergent people, what looks like preference is actually an adaptation. It's a way to stay safe in a world that hasn't shown us how to feel safe around others. Hi, I'm Essie. I'm an autistic and ADHD therapist. In this video, we're going to talk about the path back from isolation, why so many of us end up disconnected, why it makes so much sense, and how we can begin, gently, to rebuild safety with others without pushing past our limits or abandoning ourselves. When you grow up unsure how the people around you will respond, when kindness feels unpredictable or disappears when you're not careful, your nervous system learns to expect instability. You stop assuming connection is safe. You start preparing for it to disappear. This is the foundation of insecure attachment. For neurodivergent people, it often begins early and deep, fueled by family dynamics and by how often our needs were misunderstood or dismissed by the world around us. Maybe you were told you were too sensitive, too direct, too intense. Maybe you were left out without explanation or punished for behavior you didn't know was wrong. Maybe the people meant to guide you were also uncomfortable with your differences, so they tried to reshape you instead. And when you repeatedly experience rejection or correction for being your full self, your nervous system begins to anticipate that rejection, even when nothing bad is happening. This is where rejection sensitivity settles in. Rejection sensitivity is basically a finely tuned system trained by experience. When your history has been full of misattunement, your body doesn't wait for the pattern to repeat, it anticipates it early and often. That's why even kind or neutral interactions can feel confusing. Someone might be quiet because they're tired, but your nervous system reads it as, I did something wrong, I made them withdraw. Someone might forget to text back, but it lands as, they've decided I'm too much, they're pulling away. And it's exhausting, because your brain is always trying to make sense of what goes wrong before it actually does. This is the hidden labor of relational trauma, especially in neurodivergent lives, scanning everything for possible signs of future pain. And often that scanning is invisible to others. You can be outwardly confident, even charming. You can mask well or even seem unbothered. But inside, it's all calculation. How do I make sure I don't get it wrong this time? Complex trauma and rejection sensitivity often travel together, and they feed off the same fuel, past harm that was never named or healed. After enough time spent feeling misunderstood, many of us stop expecting connection to go well. Hope starts to feel expensive, especially when disappointment wears on the nervous system. We adapt by telling ourselves, I just prefer my own company. People are exhausting. I'm better off staying home. And in some ways, that feels true. There is real comfort in solitude, especially when you've spent years feeling like you had to earn your place in a conversation. When you're alone, there's no need to explain your face, your tone, your needs. You don't have to rehearse what you're going to say. You can stim freely. You can pause for as long as you need. So we start building a life that demands fewer relational demands. We fill our time with work, hobbies, research, and caretaking. We lean into our passions, animals, games, fandoms, niche topics, crafting, code. And those things matter deeply. They are places where we are fluent, powerful, focused, grounded. But even a full schedule doesn't mean you feel met. Productivity isn't connection. Hobbies don't ask about your day. And being understood by your dog or cat doesn't erase the longing to be seen by another human being. It can be tricky to spot the difference between healthy solitude and trauma-shaped withdrawal, because both can feel peaceful, at least on the surface. But one leaves you rested, the other leaves you slightly numb. And slowly you might notice the shift. You don't reach out to people you care about. Something inside you whispers, "Don't bother." You hold back something vulnerable in a conversation because a deeper part of you believes they wouldn't get it anyway. And the more often you silence those small, hopeful impulses toward connection, the more your inner world starts to narrow. This is how isolation becomes a logic system. Not a mood, a season, but a worldview. You begin to believe that needing people is dangerous, that wanting closeness is naive, that connection is a luxury other people get to have. And once that belief settles in, it doesn't matter how kind someone is. You won't trust it. You won't move toward it. After enough failed attempts at closeness, you begin to tell yourself stories that sound like boundaries, but underneath them is grief. I'm just better off on my own. People never really get me. Trying always ends up hurting. And the worst part, those stories make sense. Because connection for many autistics and ADHDers has often meant a performance. Adjusting your tone, hiding your overwhelm, tracking someone's emotions more closely than your own. But when you finally stop doing that, when you reclaim your solitude, it can feel like freedom. No more managing the reactions of others. No more performing emotional labor just to be liked. No more decoding vague texts or overanalyzing tone shifts in group chats. Just silence, space. But peace can disguise pain. In your isolation, your inner critic might start to whisper. They don't actually like you anyway. They like the version of you that masks better. You're too much. You always talk too much. You should have answered that message a week ago. Now it's too late. Don't bother. Why even try? You'll just disappoint them. The worst part is that inner critic sounds reasonable, like it's trying to protect you from another letdown. But really, it's reinforcing the belief that being known is always dangerous. And if you also carry neurodivergent perfectionism, where every interaction feels like a test you're bound to fail, connection begins to feel like an impossible standard, because you have no guarantee, ever, that you won't say the wrong thing, that others won't find your needs to be too much, that you won't miss a cue or be misread as cold or needy. That's where the imposter syndrome creeps in. They liked you now, but only because you haven't messed up yet. If you show them the real you, it'll be over. So you stay quiet, you reread texts you don't send, you keep friendships in limbo, not ending them, but not reaching out either. You ghost group chats out of the fear you already messed up. You over-apologize when you finally reply. You tell yourself you'll reach out when you're in a better place, but that place never quite arrives. It's not enough to say, just reach out. That kind of advice skips over everything that makes reconnection difficult for people like us. When you've spent years learning to retreat, to self-soothe, to stay small, to keep yourself from hoping, returning to others feels like exposure. Even the smallest invitations can feel like risks. A friend asking to meet for coffee. A group you've been quietly watching on the sidelines, thinking maybe someday you'll join. Even just sending a message can bring up a tightness in your chest, a mix of longing and dread, and a feeling of failure. When your nervous system has been trained to associate closeness with overwhelm, even a neutral interaction can feel threatening. Not because anything bad is happening in the moment, but because your body is still bracing from the last 100 times it did. You might smile, you might reply politely, you might even say yes, but internally you're tracking everything. Tone, expression, pauses, delays, trying to gauge, are they annoyed? Did I say too much? Are they pulling back? That hyper-awareness takes a toll, and it makes every interaction feel like something to recover from. So over time, the safest thing becomes avoidance. And then comes the shame, the self-talk. I'm being ridiculous. Other people seem fine with this. Why is this still so hard for me? That shame can trick you into thinking you're failing at something simple. But for us, this isn't simple. It's nervous system repair. It's trauma work. It's learning how to sit with social cues without reading them as danger. This is the part that gets left out of most advice about putting yourself out there. You can't force yourself into connection without taking your history seriously. And if you've lived a lifetime of feeling marginalized, you might not even realize how much effort you've been spending trying to feel safe around other people. If you've gotten used to the stillness of your own company, the idea of reconnecting might feel like too much. Too many variables, too many expectations, too many ways to get it wrong. So we're not aiming for transformation. We're not aiming for making friends. We're not even aiming for conversation. Remove all pressure and expectations. You are not going to become social overnight. But what you can do is test the waters gently to see what your body can tolerate. We call these behavioral experiments. In therapy, we call these behavioral experiments. The goal is to collect new data. Try something easy. Nod at the barista instead of looking away. Go to a recurring community event without committing to talking. Join a group where the focus isn't on people, but on doing something alongside people. Think birdwatching, knitting, a bookshop talk, an autism-led walking club. Something with structure where you don't have to fill the silence. You don't need to sparkle. You don't need to perform. You just need to be there. Because that's the part most of us never got to practice. Just existing around other people without trying to manage them or ourselves. And here's the secret. The more often you show up, the less your nervous system has to brace. It learns. Familiarity lowers the threat level. Someone might start recognizing your face. Maybe you say hi. Then maybe next time you sit near them. A few months in, maybe they invite you to something. And maybe one day you say yes, and it doesn't feel like danger anymore. That's the process. Not sudden closeness, but slow accumulating safety. And there's no failure here. If you show up and don't speak to anyone, that's data. If you leave early, that's data. If you try again next week, even though last week felt hard, that's practice. Rather than viewing this as building a social life, view it as retraining a system that learned to protect you by keeping other people out. Some of us don't reach for connection because we've forgotten what safety with another person feels like. Others have never experienced it at all. When your nervous system has been shaped by chronic misattunement, when you've spent years adapting yourself to feel acceptable, it makes sense that being alone feels easier. Solitude puts you back in control. You don't have to decode anyone. You don't have to wonder what they really meant. You can breathe at your own pace. But here's what we also know. The human nervous system is built for co-regulation. That doesn't mean we need to be social all the time. It doesn't mean everyone needs a big circle or constant engagement, but it does mean that our stress systems respond to safe others. When you're with someone who feels grounded, someone who accepts you without evaluating you, your heart rate settles a little. Your breath deepens. Your body softens in places you didn't even realize were tense. That's co-regulation. Polyvagal theory gives us language for this. Our social nervous system, when it feels safe, helps shift us out of chronic defense states. That means fewer shutdowns, fewer spirals, more access to calm, curiosity, even play. This is part of why isolation becomes a trap. It protects you from harm, yes, but it also deprives your nervous system of the raw materials it needs to heal. You don't unlearn fear in theory. We unlearn it through experience. Repeated moments where someone is kind, consistent, and non-threatening. Moments where you don't have to mask and nothing bad happens. Moments where your too muchness is met with warmth, or at least neutrality. And that's how healing begins. For some people, walking into a room, even one full of kind, well-meaning people, is too intimidating. Maybe it's the unpredictability, the noise, the social scripts you're expected to know without being taught. Maybe it's the way your brain can't quite filter the important from the background, or the way your body tenses automatically when someone new looks your way. Whatever the reason, if groups feel like too much, it means your system is telling you what it can and can't handle right now. So don't start with groups. Start with one person. If you can access a therapist, especially one who understands neurodivergence and complex trauma, that can be the safest first practice space. A consistent, structured relationship, no small talk required. For some people, it's a support worker. For others, it might be a long-distance friend or someone you've chatted with online. It might even be a peer support group that meets over text, where you can respond at your own pace and opt out without judgment. And sometimes the first connection isn't even external, it's internal. It's letting yourself name belonging, letting yourself say, I wish I had someone, or I want to feel known again. Because that's a kind of turning too. That's a movement out of numbness. That's something coming alive again. And you don't have to act on that feeling right away. You don't have to chase it. Just notice it. Let it be real, even if it's tender, even if it aches. There's a story that floats underneath a lot of neurodivergent isolation. It goes something like this. I should have figured this out by now. Other people my age have friends, partners, community. I'm still stuck. I missed some milestone, and now it's too late. And I want to say this as clearly as I can. There is no correct timeline for healing from chronic disconnection. There's no deadline for learning how to be with people in a way that feels safe. If your early relationships taught you that closeness was dangerous, if the world told you your needs were too much, if your brain has had to filter every interaction through survival logic, of course it's taken time. Of course it's been slow. And still you're here, still listening, still curious. That means some part of you hasn't given up yet. The truth is, many of us don't begin reconnecting until much later in life. Some of us never had a childhood that felt safe enough to build real friendships. Some of us spent decades mistaking masking for closeness. Some of us have only just begun to unlearn the shame we were handed for being different. Healing from that doesn't happen in a clean arc. It happens in moments, a kind gesture that doesn't tighten your chest, an interaction that leaves you feeling steady instead of empty, a text you send and don't panic about. They are the unremarkable pieces of a nervous system remembering what safety feels like. And whether you're right at the beginning or somewhere in the middle, you're allowed to take your time. There is no too late when it comes to learning how to come home to other people and to yourself. If you found this video helpful, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with anyone you think might benefit from my content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.